Hey guys, welcome back to Car Culture TV, or as we like to call it, CCTV. I'm Aryan,
I'm on it.
and in this week's episode, we're going to be discussing the weekly car news in Speed Trap, and then we're going to be moving on to Cutting the Apex, in which we'll be discussing the world of motorsport. Now let's get into Speed Trap. So, our first bit of news here, the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. This is the newest concept out of Jeep that they've released for a 2022 version of the Grand Wagoneer. So, they had a version of this car back in the day. It was like a luxury-focused car, and people liked it, but they did discontinue it quickly because, Jeep is known for their off-roading stuff, and nothing about this resembles off-road. Well, they just released a concept for this car, and people have been super excited because, it doesn't look like a Jeep at all, but it does look kind of interesting, and it's interesting to see this kind of car come out of Jeep, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first thing that they did, just looking at the design, is there isn't a Jeep badge on the front, right? It says Wagoneer across the front. They look like they're trying to move away from a typical Jeep design and a Jeep look, which is pretty much rugged, off-roader, but not super expensive type of class. And they look like they're trying to enter this, you know what that looks a lot like? A Range Rover badge running across the top.
Yes, it looks a lot, it's super luxury focused, right? From the outside, you can tell that the inside of this car is going to be amazingly, it's going to be a pure luxury car. And it's definitely
I wouldn't say it's amazing.
Well, I don't know. It looks. We don't know too much about this car. We have some exterior pictures, some interior pictures, but not much is confirmed. And honestly, a release date also isn't necessarily confirmed. It's called the 2022 Grand Wagoneer, but yeah, it's still technically a concept in some way or the other. Well, we do have some information on price range. So, what's the normal price range of a Jeep?
I don't know, anywhere from like a really cheap old used manual being like $5,000 all the way up to like a brand new loaded off-road 4x4 being up to maybe like 40,000.
Yeah, so you're looking at peak for like a stock Jeep, maybe 40, 50,000. If you're going for something super, super rugged, most people they'll enter at about that 20K value for a newer vehicle.
Right.
Well, this car is supposed to start at 60K, already much above the high-end Jeep price, and apparently it'll go up to 100K.
Holy crap.
So the real question is, who's paying that much for a Jeep? Which, when you consider Fiat Chrysler and all of their car brands, which Jeep is one of them, reliability is nowhere in the question. They have no sense of reliability whatsoever. 60,000 miles are like the cap for this car.
Yeah, look, here's the thing. I have never held back my feelings towards Fiat Chrysler. I don't like them as an auto company, and it's not that they don't make great cars, right? I think they've done some cool stuff in the car world. I love Alpha. I love the new Giulia that they've put out. It's a great car, but they suck at reliability. They suck at making something that lasts more than a year or two. And I would never, ever, ever pay $100,000 for a Jeep.
I mean, look, if any other car company released a car that looked like this, had those kind of price specs and the kind of vibe, the luxury vibe this car's going for, maybe I'd be a lot more excited for it. But the thing is, this car is a Jeep, and Jeeps aren't great. They're not safe. They're not long-lasting, and they don't have any reputation for being amazingly good. The only other Jeep that's kind of in this price range is the Jeep Gladiator, and you really can't even compare the two.
Right, and I know you guys out there are thinking yes, we are really crapping on these Jeeps. They're not great cars. I get it. A lot of people love Jeeps, and they're really good for what they're built for, which is a little bit of off-roading. They've got a roll cage, go rock crawling, whatever it is you want to do. But they make really horrible road cars in terms of their 3-star crash safety rating. They are really large, a lot of road noise from their big-ass tires. And so, I get that Jeep is not that brand, but it's okay because they've always been just doing their own thing. For them to kind of make this reach out, go into this space with luxury cars, now they're competing against the Lincoln Navigator, they're competing against a Cadillac Escalade with that kind of price point, that kind of luxury SUV. They don't have that, I guess I would say they don't have that history or that tradition in their background. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they're just going to blow everyone out of the water or if they're going to pull a classic Jeep move and it's just going to be another Jeep that's kind of glorified.
Yeah, exactly. Our next bit of news here. So this is the Lexus IS. This is the new one for the 2021 model year. Had a little bit of refresh from the last couple of ones, but the Lexus IS has honestly been one of those cars that when it first came out, the refreshed one in about 2014, everyone was like, whoa, this car is super cool. I think it's amazing. It looks really sleek, interesting power specs, all-wheel drive sedan. That's the new thing that people are really trying to look after. And it was relatively sporty. But it soon fell off almost immediately because in a year, other car companies like Infiniti and, Kia started to do similar things with the Stinger. And this car suddenly felt terrible because they didn't update it for the last like 6 years, and honestly, it lost all of its sporty touch, and Lexus has just fallen off as a brand, and a lot of it has been linked to this car because they didn't change at all, and everyone got tired of it.
Right. If you look at its older brother, right, the original car that kind of put this on the map was the ISF. Right, Lexus's F division. They're the ones that made the LFA. They're the ones that make their sporty cars. The ISF was incredible. V8 engine, really good for its time. Honestly, if you still see one on the road, you know it. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, so this is a older Lexus ISF. I mean, yeah, you can obviously tell that it is an older car.
It's a 2000s car.
Yeah, the styling isn't exactly like, still prominent today, but it had a V8. It was a fun sports car, and people really, really liked it.
Right. And then when they put out this new IS in 2014, everyone was like, okay, next year they're going to put out the ISF. Next year, the ISF. And it just didn't happen. Not only that, they never really updated the design. They made a couple tweaks here and there. Yeah, they added like heating seats or maybe a blind spot monitor. But they never brought the car back up to that level. And they had an F Sport or F-type version. But it was nothing like the original ISF. It just had some cute bells and whistles, maybe a nice speedometer, but it was so low on power compared to all of the competitors in its segment, which is entry-level luxury sports sedans, right?
Exactly.
If you look at the Acura, what is that? The Acura TSX, or you look at now maybe even like Genesis G70, the BMW 3 Series,
Kia Stinger.
Mercedes C-Class, even a Kia Stinger if you want to go there, all of those cars are putting out roughly between plus minus 270, 320 horsepower at their entry-level trim. The top-level trim for the IS now is putting out how much horsepower?
Around 300.
300, and that's coming out of a turboed six-cylinder.
Exactly, which is really low because most of the inline 4 variants of the other cars you mentioned, which is the lower end of those cars, already make around 250, 270, and like Mercedes is reaching that 300 value with those cars. So
exactly.
Like it's kind of underwhelming. Well, anyways, we mentioned the Lexus ISF. This was the car that made Lexus and the IS brand a bit more prominent, why people were initially excited about that newer IS. Well, there's a big rumor in the market that the ISF is coming back with the V8 from this car. So that means they're going to have a new V8 in the car, make a ton more power, hopefully, and maybe Lexus can finally re-earn that sports car, vibe that they had going on before when the original ISF existed.
Right, so, here's my take on that, right? When I first heard, okay, maybe finally now Lexus has confirmed we will be putting out an ISF, I was initially really excited. But now, let's say I'm hesitantly optimistic, and here's why. Lexus did a great job back in the day with the LFA. That V10 is one of my favorite engines, and that car is still iconic. It is incredible. It has increased in value. It's amazing. But then, right after that, they put out the RCF, which had a V8, naturally aspirated, and they put out, even after that, what people thought would be the LFA, next
Successor,
gen.
yeah,
the successor, the LC. And with both of those cars, not going to lie, in my opinion, I think they were kind of a disappointment. They kind of hit the technical checkboxes that you want from a cool sports car, but they never brought back that original connection to the car or the driving feel that the old cars of Lexus, the ISF, the LFA, had with it. And honestly, they were really down on power. If you look at an RCF, that is a V8, right?
Yeah.
And I get that it's naturally aspirated, but it's putting somewhere around the ballpark of 400 horsepower.
Exactly.
Which is so disappointing when you can go look at Mercedes CLA entry-level AMG car putting out 415 out of a turboed 4-cylinder.
Now, I mean, you can give them some credit. Lexus is one of the few people still sticking with a naturally aspirated V8, and when you put a V8 in a car, nowadays, because of fuel economy and regulations, you're not really seeing that many naturally aspirated cars. So I guess they tried to do something special when making a naturally aspirated V8, but still, you'd want to see that cross, maybe even the 500 barrier, because if you think about the V6 in the C8 Corvette, that's already making 495 horsepower.
Exactly, and that's not the Z01.
Exactly. So you got to think about it, what is Lexus doing with these cars? I mean, they really need to try a little more. And the other thing about this whole rumor about the ISF coming back and having that V8, in a world where we're almost getting rid of engines, I'd say in maybe 15 years, we might be in a market where maybe 50% of the cars are just completely electric.
Which will be sad to see, but I agree with that.
So is it really worth seeing a company like Lexus, who's already almost just people have discarded their V8s in the past with the LC and the RC, should they even bother putting all the R&D into making another V8 car, or should they just switch completely, change their whole vibe that's going on, and just go electric for a new IS car?
That's the thing. And honestly, Lexus, like if you're listening, like what I'm really hoping for them to do is full send on this ISF. I want to see the new industry leading, segment defining ISF come out and just blow everyone's pants off. You know, I want it to be incredible. I want it to be fast. It's got to check every single box, but it's got to have amazing driving feel. And it's got to put Lexus back on the map when it comes to a sport luxury sedan. Because right now, they're turning into an old people brand. You know, no offense to the old people. They make some great cars, the LS, the ES. They're great, like, luxury, boring cars. But that's it. They're just great luxury, boring cars with the dinky cruise, you know, knob on the side.
Yeah,
so it's like, if you want to do that, stick to it. Don't keep trying to mess around with the sport segment. But if you're really going to put an ISF out, I really want it to be incredible. I want to be excited. I want it to go back to the days where I can put that car as a poster on my wall.
Yep. So our next bit of news here. This one is actually pretty interesting, and I was kind of surprised when I first read the news. But I do understand like why it's happening. So Honda and GM. They're probably two of the biggest competitors in the car industry. I mean, GM makes most of the American cars you've ever heard of, Chevy, Cadillac, etc., etc. And then Honda is huge. They have the most popular consumer cars out there, the Honda Civic, Honda Accord, Honda Odyssey. They're huge. And both cars in America especially are big competitors. But they have just announced that they're going to be collaborating with each other on a line of electric vehicles, which I cannot imagine.
That's going to be really interesting. Honestly, at this point, I like to call it the Tesla effect, right?
Exactly.
Tesla has disrupted the market to the extent where all these other car companies have, for the last, I would say, even 5 years, just been scrambling to try to put out electric cars that are going to keep up with now the demand that they're seeing for electric cars, and Tesla leading the charge really with their Model 3 and now the Model Y.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. But it's interesting to see that now they're going to the extent of a Japanese, developer is trying to merge with an American company, and they're like, let's put our heads together and figure out how to make an electric car that people are going to want to buy, right? It's not like GM hasn't made electric cars. It's not like Honda hasn't made electric cars. They both have. GMs have been a complete failure, and Hondas have only really been mildly successful.
They're kind of like just developing, but not really there.
Exactly.
I mean, they might just really benefit by helping each other out here, because if you think about all the car companies that have decided to shift to like electric designs, all of them are getting external help. Mercedes got some help with Bosch. Ford invested heavily in Rivian to maybe get some help there. So it seems that there's a lot of collaborations going on with these car companies when trying to make their electric platforms. But with all those examples in the past, it's not one huge competitor and another huge competitor. It's one big industry leader with a smaller company that can really just help with the electric stuff.
Definitely.
I don't know how useful this collaboration is going to be, because at the end of the day, neither of them have any sort of electric platform that's super successful they can build on. With Ford and Rivian has an amazing electric platform that's like ready to go.
Right.
So Ford can really benefit off of that development. But it's like neither of them have any of that electric development, so I don't know why they would necessarily work with each other for it.
Right. The question really is, can two negatives make a positive?
Yeah.
And this is going to be that kind of industry-defining moment of will they pull it off. It's interesting you mentioned that. So Tesla, Elon Musk, their CEO, actually went and visited Volkswagen and tested out their ID3, their electric platform, and actually said it was, quote, not bad. So, it's cool that Tesla is at least looking at other car companies and potentially working together, which would be really exciting. But in the meantime, I am interested to see what kind of weird car they put out. And it's like, it kind of makes me think like BMW and Toyota when they're working on the Supra, right?
Yeah.
It looks like a Toyota Supra on the outside with the badge, but if you open it up, it's BMW everywhere, right? So is it going to be one of those things where we end up seeing like a Honda electric car, but if you open the hood, it's all GM and GM's reliability? Or is it going to be vice versa? I'm definitely interested to see where this goes, if it's just going to be, let's just share some R&D patents and we'll both make our own thing, or if it's going to be, let's release a car together that's electric.
Yeah.
And depending on what direction that takes, this will be a really interesting story to follow.
For sure. Now let's get into cutting the apex. Last weekend, we had possibly the most interesting F1 race I've seen in my life. Monza 2020. This is the iconic Italian high-speed track, the Temple of Speed, as many call it. And usually, I mean, in years past, I don't think this has been the most interesting race, because in terms of high-speed car So only one Formula team has really dominated that, and it's been Ferrari, and this is their home racetrack. So they're usually the fastest of the fast, but if you look at this picture here, you might see that the Ferraris are nowhere to be seen in the front because this year they've been having some huge engine issues and have been incredibly slow. It really just back markers at this point, right?
Definitely. And so we will probably be discussing some spoilers from this race. So if you haven't seen the race yet, go watch it first, then come back and check out what we have to say about it. But if you have, I guess just keep on going.
Yeah.
So with that, I would say it's funny that this is the starting photo, right? And Ferrari's already in the back. If we keep following this, I would say halfway into the race, there won't even be any Ferraris on the track.
Exactly. So, Sebastian Vettel, the four-time former world champion, who races for Ferrari, and this will be his last season. Maybe he's possibly happy to leave considering how horrible their car has been. Anyways, he had a terrible brake failure going into the first corner after a few laps in, and essentially went through all the styrofoam barriers that blocked the track, and drove the rest of the lap with no brakes, impressive, and back to the pits, didn't finish the race. And then a few laps later, Charles Leclerc, the other Formula One driver, the young hotshot winner at Monza last year, slammed into a wall. And at a very high speed, luckily he was all okay. He actually ran right after the race, and his medical checks came in today. He's perfectly fine, and he'll be racing next weekend as well. But that actually red flagged the race, and that is where this race really, really just turned around completely.
I know, and honestly, like a lot of fans have been saying this season of F1 has been really boring because Mercedes has been a powerhouse. They've been dominating every single race, and I'll agree. As a huge F1 fan, I want to see some racing, and you want to see that driver skill come out when it's about passing, closing the gap, making cool moves, and you just haven't seen that with the front of the pack because Mercedes just pulls away every week. And I remember when you and I sat down to watch this race live, the first thing I said was it's just going to be Lewis Hamilton pulling away the rest of the race, and then just see what happens with everyone else.
Exactly.
And I was so excited to see that on a high-speed track where Lewis Hamilton set the track record during qualifying, he had a horrible day. And as much as I love Lewis Hamilton, I think he's a great, outstanding driver, definitely one of the best in the modern era.
100%, yeah.
It's just boring to see him always winning. I think, honestly, like, he would say that he's getting a little bit bored in the front, too, as much as it must be nice to win.
I mean, yeah, he said openly in an interview that he gets why the fans are so bored and so annoyed. Because the Mercedes car, I don't know how they did this so well. Because, I mean, in years past, they've been great. But it's never been as bad as this year, where at each race, they have a 30-second gap to the next car behind them. And it's just ridiculous. If you look at the track map during a race, they're like halfway through the next lap, and then everyone else is just bunched to the side.
Yeah.
So it's not even fun to watch the top positions. 1, 2, and 3 is usually already set. You just look at the rest onwards and hope something interesting happens.
Right. So it was really exciting to see fans that were normally complaining about how uncompetitive F1 was to see this race where after the red flag caused by Charles Leclerc's crash, we almost saw like a near reverse grid. Like, granted, Lewis Hamilton started after the red flag in the front. He had to take that 20-second time penalty going through the pits for pitting under a yellow flag when it wasn't allowed. And then we got to see what I think unfolded to be one of the most exciting races in a long time.
Yeah, so after the red flag and the race restart, which I can't remember the last time that's ever happened, but anyways, after the race restart, we had 3 leaders in this race, completely different from anyone else. This is actually, F1 said that this was the 296th different podium arrangement that they've ever seen, because if you look at the last few races, the podium arrangement has been the same,
right,
more or less. So anyways, the leaders, we start with, in 3rd place, Lance Stroll. Did he deserve to be there? No. I think a kind of like chance thing happened to be there. He held the position because he has essentially a Mercedes car.
Yeah, like,
right.
I don't want to dive totally into Racing Point and how much they've copied Mercedes. We've covered that on a previous episode, so go check that out if you really want to hear our thoughts on that. But I will say that, like, I see him as daddy's little rich boy. He definitely pays to be there.
Yeah.
There's a lot more talented drivers, not even in F1, that would do a much better job in his seat. No offense, Lance Stroll. But the reality is, like, he still has a decently fast car. It's still decently competitive, again, because they're pretty much running an old Mercedes from last year.
And at the end of the day, like, he's an F1, so he'll be decently fast.
Right. He's still an F1 driver. Daddy probably played for a lot of good race lessons, so, he's not I'm not saying he's incompetent or completely incapable. I'm just saying that he's not one of the most talented drivers out there. And so, like, him getting third, whoop-de-doo. I mean, he started in the front and then pretty much lost those positions to better drivers.
Yep. And then, second place, my second favorite driver, Carlos Sainz, whose shirt is signed right up there, racing for McLaren. I mean, he had a phenomenal weekend. Starting from qualifying, he set third, which is amazing considering there's so many other high-speed competitors in the sport.
And McLaren is not known for their straight line speed.
Exactly. They're just known for having a car.
A good one.
A good one, and
Yeah.
it go. It's pretty
He
decently
couldn't even
fast.
start last weekend.
Exactly. So it was really happy to see him start third place, and I was like, yes, maybe he can get another podium because he really deserves it, and he's one of the best drivers, in my opinion, on the grid. And this year, he did amazingly. From the start, he held second place, and he held that most of the way through. Then the red flag happened, and because of some pit stops, he shuffled back down the grid. But as soon as the race started again, brilliant start another time, and he worked his way up to second place. And honestly, he really showed this whole race that, like, he is a legendary driver out of these current F1 grid of 2020, and he's gonna do amazing wherever he goes.
That's the thing. With a lot of the drivers on the grid, I think sometimes they don't have the opportunity to showcase their talent. Whether it's the vehicle, some team strategy, or they had an accident, some reliability issue, a lot of the drivers don't get to, even show how close they are in skill and competition to some of the top drivers like Lewis or Valtteri Bottas for Mercedes. And that's just because of differences in the car. So it's really exciting to see someone like Carlos Sainz go out there, get out of his dad's shadow and all of that he's been working to get out of, his dad being a racing legend, especially in the rally world, and just light the car on fire. I mean, he was insane around the track. He was insane during qualifying, incredible all weekend, great with the strategy, and he drove like it. No mistakes, very well executed, and definitely harnessed the most you could harness out of that McLaren.
Great performance all around. Really glad he got second place. He was so close to getting first, and I still wish he had. I'm still somewhat upset, but let's move on to who got first place. Pierre Gasly. Honestly, he just did amazingly this race. The red flag helped him out a little bit, but at the end of the day, to hold that place, he made no mistakes. He's in a lower midfield car, the AlphaTauri, or formerly known as Toro Rosso. It's not necessarily the faster car on the grid by any means, and he just really showed his racing chops at this race. I mean, he did phenomenal.
Yeah, honestly, like, I have to admit, I have a love-hate relationship with Pierre.
Yep,
There's
same.
times where I think, like, dude, what are you doing? You're better than that. You're smarter than that. When he was racing for Red Bull through last season, or at least the beginning of last season, there were some races I was like, come on, you're better than this. And it's because he is incredible in the Toro Rosso, or now what it's called, the AlphaTauri.
Yeah.
He's amazing in that car, and for some reason he couldn't figure out the Red Bull. He lost his seat there. He came back to Toro Rosso. It got renamed to AlphaTauri. And he's been doing incredible this season.
Yeah, he's actually been, well, we'll discuss this a little bit later, but he has been beating Alex Albon who's in the Red Bull car about every race or so. He's been doing really, really well, and honestly, yeah, the kid can race. He's amazing, and to be the second French winner since 1996, it's really impressive to see him win that race. He definitely deserves it. He's had probably, out of all the F1 drivers, maybe the toughest time these last 2 years. So yeah, obviously starting at Red Bull, a dream position, right? Being on the second best team, honestly. But he lost it because I don't know how he just didn't have consistent races. Helmut Marko dissed the man so hard. Helmut Marko is essentially like the leader of the Red Bull team. And yeah, he
got roasted.
He said he was afraid of passing. The last thing you want to hear from an F1 driver. And yeah, so he lost a seat, and it was deservedly so. I mean, he just had terrible performance, and he was sent back in the Toro Rosso. But even at the end of that season, he got third in a race, his first ever podium.
That was horrible too, because that was the race when he got the call after the summer break that he was going back to Toro Rosso. His old karting friend, Antoine Hubert, died in the crash.
That was rough. And
after that, he raced an incredible race at Spa. And this year, he had some incredible passes at Spa.
Oh, yeah. And we looked at some older race footage, and he actually mimicked a move he did back from his F3 days where he got super close to the corner of the track in Eau Rouge and just sent it through and did an amazing pass. So, honestly, yeah, starting at Red Bull and then getting kicked out, which is super humiliating. His best friend dying in a terrible car accident in F1, in Formula 2. And then he finally worked his way up. He got that podium in Brazil last year, and to finally get a race win this year, I mean,
Amazing.
you can't be like mad at the guy. He's
Right.
just, it's amazing, and you have to be proud of AlphaTauri and Pierre Gasly.
You can't make up that story. It is incredible what he pulled off in Monza. It was a combination of obviously a little bit of luck with that early pit before the red flag, and then doing some great passing right after the red flag restart. But then you could actually hear on the radio, he was even going through some corners, coasting, making sure to maintain his tires. His team saw that Carlos was closing the gap. They said, we think the tires are fine, you can push. And then he really did, and he put in great lap after great lap.
Yep.
Very consistent performance. Again, getting the most out of that AlphaTauri, a car that's definitely slower than McLaren this weekend at Monza, and pulling off that race win.
So the question is, should Pierre Gasly be a Red Bull driver next season? As of now, his spot isn't confirmed, and neither is Alex Albon's, who is the secondary driver at Red Bull. So should Pierre Gasly take Albon's place?
So this is going to be controversial. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I'm going to have to say no.
This is controversial. I have to say no, but I don't think it might be for a different reason. So let's hear yours first.
So here's my logic, right? Pierre is an incredible driver. He's very talented, and the biggest thing is he gets the most out of the Toro Rosso, right? If you look at his performance in Red Bull, before he started with Red Bull, he had the whole winter season testing, performing, getting fitted, getting to know the car, and he just couldn't get what he wanted to out of the machine. Then a short summer break, halfway through which he says, you go back to Red Bull. He literally jumps in that Toro Rosso, halfway through he jumps in and says, you go back to Toro Rosso. And he literally jumps back into that seat at Spa and pops off for the rest of the season, getting a podium in Brazil. Start over this season, again, an incredible performance. They had a little bit of low at the beginning because of the car. They brought the car back, and there's Pierre all the way back, and he's actually doing even better this season than he ever has. I think him being in the Toro Rosso, he has a better relationship with the team, understands the chassis and the car better, and does a great job. So for that reason, why would you take him out of his comfort zone and put him in the Red Bull?
Exactly.
The Toro Rosso is more than capable of being a competitive car, especially when we see the rule changes start coming in 2022. I'm not saying he will stay with the team for that long. F1 drivers like to jump around a lot. But I want to see if this was a one-off or if this was something that he can get really consistent as. He's showing the signs that he's a consistently good driver. Now he has the platform to do it. All eyes are on him. So I want him to stay on that stage with the Toro Rosso or the AlphaTauri, whatever you want to call it, and really pop off. On the other side of that, Alex Albon is an incredible driver, and right now he's incredibly underappreciated and getting a lot of hate from a lot of fans that don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes at Red Bull. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest things there is that Red Bull has put Alex with his car on a different experimental chassis to Max Verstappen, his teammate. And so a lot of people have been saying, wow, look at Max, he's doing incredible, he's gotten podiums this season, he qualifies really well. And meanwhile, look at Alex, he barely makes it to Q3 during qualifying, he hasn't been doing well in his race pace is garbage, he's on different tires, he does really bad. Well, Helmut Marko came out and said, yeah, we've had Alex on a different chassis, an experimental chassis. That's why he's had different tire strategies and different performances at every race. And that's why you don't see Helmut Marko doing what he did with Pierre Gasly and getting on with the media and saying, yeah, Alex sucks, he doesn't like to pass or whatever. And that's why. So before people go and give Alex a lot of hate, we have to remember he did incredible in Toro Rosso as well, but when he was put in the Red Bull, again, without a lot of practice or warm-up, he did incredible for the second half of that season last year. He's more than capable of doing a great job in the Red Bull. It's only a matter of time before they can get a Red Bull that's dialed in to fit his perspective and his driving style, and I promise you, he is world champion material.
Yeah, I completely agree. Pierre Gasly, and I don't think that he should be going to Red Bull, at least at this point. And Alex Albon, yeah, he's a fantastic driver, and the main reason he hasn't been performing so well this year is because of that experimental car and experimental strategy they've been working on him. But the thing is, I don't think Pierre Gasly should even stay in the Red Bull Academy or like group of cars.
Oh, really?
Because here's the thing. He's doing great in the Toro Rosso, but obviously that's not a car that's going to be a top car ever because Red Bull's the top team.
Right.
So they'll never let that be excessively
just because
better.
of the budgeting, honestly.
Yeah, just because of how that works. And here's the thing about the Red Bull seat. Red Bull has made it very clear that they want Max Verstappen to be the next youngest world champion. They're putting all their effort towards him. And it's to the point where Max Verstappen has a contract stipulation of a certain driver standing that he has to have. And Alex Albon doesn't have that contract stipulation. So because of that, they're always going to try to put an experimental thing with a second driver, and they're not going to let their second driver just do as well, because all focus goes to Max.
Right.
So even if they decide to put Pierre in that Red Bull seat for next year, his partner is going to be Max. And guess who? All the attention, all the limelight, all the resources is still going to go to Max, not Pierre. And he deserves so much better than that. Honestly, Pierre Gasly deserves a lot. Like, he showed his skill completely during this race, and he doesn't deserve to be a second driver at that level, really. He needs a teammate that's equal, and he gets equal focused. So the only reason I would see him going to Red Bull is if he also manages to get that contract stipulation in. And maybe with this success and his more recent successes, he might have an argument to put that contract stipulation in, but unless he can't, if he cannot do that, then Red Bull doesn't make as much sense. But yeah, there's that whole issue where, look, there's 10 teams in F1, and only 3 of them are decently good. So when you really think about it, where else would he go besides another midfield team?
Right.
And there's not many spots open right now for that next 2021 season. So the chances are he'll stay in Red Bull for another year. But
Toro Rosso.
Toro Rosso, but like the Red Bull sphere of cars for
Right.
another year. But Carlos Sainz, he was a Toro Rosso driver. He was in the Red Bull Academy, started with Toro Rosso, but he left Toro Rosso. He went to Renault after that, and then he went to McLaren, where he's at now. And honestly, I think that might be the best move for him, leaving the Red Bull sphere of cars. Because if he keeps trapping himself in that like cycle of just the Red Bull, AlphaTauri, Red Bull, AlphaTauri, Red Bull, AlphaTauri, it's not going to work that well, and he's going to put a cap on his success somewhere just because of Max.
So you're saying you want Pierre Gasly to pull a Danny Rick and just completely change out of the Red Bull?
Yep, and it's very risky, and it's going to be hard to find a seat, but there's going to be a few seats opening up within the next 2 or 3 years, and I think that he could find a lot of success if he switches out of there. Because, yeah, as long as Max races, he's not going to be able to show off his skills like he does in the AlphaTauri.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at Daniel Ricciardo's example, right, like he leaves the Red Bull, a top team, really takes a hit going to Renault, who had a train wreck of a season last year and not incredible this year, definitely better, but not incredible.
Yeah.
And now he's going to McLaren, which I think next year with the Mercedes engine is going to be incredible.
Yeah. So I think that's my opinion. I'm sure you guys all have different opinions. Let us know in the comments below. But one thing is for certain, we will have a brilliant rest of the 2020 F1 season with these new tracks coming in, and I'm very excited for the years to come in Formula 1. Honestly, my passion for Formula 1, it was kind of dwindling last couple of races because they were so boring, but this race reminds everyone why people are fans of Formula 1 and why this sport is just so intense.
Getting rid of those engine modes, bringing the pack closer, it's only going to make the racing more interesting. I'm really excited to see how Pierre and honestly the rest of the pack pull off the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm. Alright guys, that's all we have for today's video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and watch our previous videos for more car culture. Also, you can find the audio version of our podcast on Anchor.fm and Spotify. The link for that will be in the descriptions. And stay tuned for next week's episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
On the move.